Hey folks, here we are going through another one of these application videos. This is Utah, and this video is going to touch on, the highlights, the basics of what you need to know. If you want way more detail, strategy articles, strategy videos, draw odds, everything, along with all their maps, go out to Go Hunt, sign up for Insider, and when you use promo code RANDY, they'll give you $50 in their gear shop. So, this year, I'm looking at the Utah regulations right here on my computer, and it says the deadline is, oh boy, it's a day earlier than last year, imagine that. It's March 3rd, 2022 at 11 p.m. Mountain Time. So, the other thing they do that's kind of weird in Utah is they give you an extended period for buying a bonus or preference point. I'm not quite sure why that is, and also a deadline to withdraw your application. They add 2 weeks to that. I've often struggled with why they do that, but I don't care. None of my business. That's what Utah does, so just know if you want to apply, March 3rd is your deadline. The other thing, here's a weird part about Utah. They make us apply before we even know what the quotas are. So they have their wildlife board meeting and sometime in late April, usually the last week of April. And that's when they finalize the quotas. And then a few weeks later, they conduct the draw. Well, we got to apply for these units way back here in March. So I'm going to go through some of the things you need to know about applying in Utah, what the costs are, what the upfront costs are, because I always say there's the sunk costs. In other words, costs you're never getting back. And then there's the if you're lucky costs. So the sunk costs, the never to be seen again costs, are your non-resident, non-refundable hunting license, which is $72. And then you've got $15 per species that you can apply for. Just know that those are upfront costs. Gone, not getting those back. And then when you look at the tag fees, they went up a lot in 2021, but most people would say it's still worth it in Utah if you draw one of these premium limited entry tags that you might be applying for. And here's the cost. Limited entry deer, $768. Limited entry elk, $1,000, but if you apply for some of the premium stuff and the, I think, multi-season stuff, it can get as high as a little over $1,800, but most of the ones you're going to apply for are $1,000. Pronghorn, $337. And then moose, bison, mountain goat, desert bighorn, and Rocky Mountain bighorn, all 5 of those, the fee went up to $2,200. Glad I drew my bison tag in 2000, whatever that was, 18, I think, when the price was a little lower. I think it was $1,200 at the time. So those are the costs. Now, I'm going to talk about this from the non-resident standpoint because there are different rules for what non-residents can apply for versus what residents can apply for. So non-residents, starting 12 or 13 years ago, they said, you can apply for everything because we really like your application fees. So you'll see in the point pools that they used to treat us like residents as far as what we could apply for, and I'll quickly touch on that in a second, but you'll see this big bubble of points at 12 points or 13 points, I can't remember which it is. And so you see, and this big spike was the year where they told non-residents, you can apply for every species. Because it used to be that as non-residents, we were treated just like how it currently is for residents. Residents can only apply for one of these 3, deer, elk, or antelope. And they can only apply for one of the big 5 once in a lifetime that I mentioned, moose, bison, mountain goat, or desert or Rocky bighorns. So residents in Utah, you got to choose which of the 3 do I want out of elk, deer, and antelope, and which of the once in a lifetime do I want. So people kind of had to make that choice, and that's what they started building points for. And that's still how it is for you residents, but whatever I said like 12 or 13 years ago, they let non-residents apply for everything. So kind of weird when you look at the point totals in the non-resident column and compare them to the resident column. So you bought your license, you're getting ready to do the application, and you're like, well, what kind of point system do they have? Well, this is where life gets pretty complicated. Not as complicated as some states, but still somewhat complicated. So Utah has 2 point systems. One for their general deer. And you're thinking, well, general deer, why do they call it general deer if I have to apply for it? I don't know, ask Utah. But general deer is easy, it's on a preference point system. Most points gets the tag, right? We've talked about that many times. All the other species, like limited entry deer as opposed to general deer, elk, antelope, and the 5 once-in-a-lifetime species, they're all on a bonus point system, but I would call it a hybrid bonus point system. And I'll go into that detail and you'll see why I call it a hybrid system. And know that in this, these draw systems, Utah caps us non-residents to 10%. But the good news is they give us our own pool of tags. So we're not competing against residents for that to reach that 10%. We get carved out, here's how many tags you non-residents get, you're all applying for that pool. Which is, to me, better. I would prefer to know, here's our 10%, and this is what we're all competing for. So, I said a hybrid point system. What do I mean by that? Okay. I'm going to try my best to explain, so hopefully you've got some time here. And this system, this hybrid system, is the same for residents and non-residents. So there are 2 parts to this hybrid draw. There's the first part and the second part. So the first part actually functions like a true preference point system. What they do is half of the tags go over here, and the person with the most points gets the tag. So it's like, why do you call that a bonus point system? That's a preference point system. So every applicant goes into the first part of the draw for half the tags. And it's the person with the most points gets the tag. So think of that first half as a preference point draw. Now, everybody who didn't draw over here gets thrown into the second part of the draw. That is a true bonus point draw. So first part, effectively a preference point draw. Second part is a bonus point draw. And what we say about bonus point draws, right, is like buying raffle tickets. The person with 1 raffle ticket might win the raffle, but their probability isn't as good as someone who's got 20 raffle tickets. So that's what you got to be thinking about. And looking at all the draw odds and all this, most people, unless you're at the very high point level, you're not going to draw in the first part. So most of us are looking at, all right, do I have a chance of drawing over here in the bonus point, the second part of the draw? So that's a complicated way of doing it. But, you know, I think there's a couple states that are even more complicated. So Utah, you still got a ways to go to get to be the most complicated. But now they throw this little trigger in there. You can only draw 1 limited entry tag per year, which probably isn't that big a deal. I mean, who has enough points that they're going to draw multiple limited entry tags in Utah? Not very many people. But, so here's how they go about it, is once you draw a limited entry tag, all your remaining applications get tossed and you just get a bonus point for that year for the remaining species. And they go in this order: limited entry deer, limited entry elk, pronghorn, the sheep, moose, goat, and then bison. And then the last one, they do the general deer draw. So if you were to draw limited entry deer, you'd get that tag, and then all your other applications would get put over here, and you'd just get a bonus point. So you didn't draw deer, you didn't draw elk, and like me, this year I've got a pile of pronghorn points. I'm thinking this might be my year to draw pronghorn because I have so few points for deer and elk. I'm not drawing those. Don't worry about that. But I got a ton for pronghorn. Well, if I draw that pronghorn tag, I'm going to get tossed for all the once in a lifetimes draws that come after that. And I'm just going to get another point for them. So hopefully that gives some idea of how the draw itself works and also the sequence of the draw and why that matters if you're one of those lucky people that would have drawn 2 tags. A lot of people will say, hey, if I draw a tag, can I return it? Most instances, the limited entry tags you're going to apply for in Utah, you aren't going to want to return it. But if you did, you can do that 30 days before the season opens and you'll get your points restored, but you won't get a point for this year. And also if you return it within 30 days, you can possibly get your tag fee refunded. The question always comes down to, is Utah worth it? I struggle to say it is or it isn't, because it depends on what your interest is, what your budget is, and what other options you have in other states, right? Value is comparative to what you see with other alternatives. So I'm going to let you decide if Utah is worth the value, and I'm going to walk through my example and give you some data that might be something that most people overlook. And if they were to look at this, it would probably change their impression of what value Utah represents. So if you look at the draw odds out at GoHunt, every limited entry species, really, really difficult draw odds, especially if you're down here at the bottom. And I lucked out. I drew elk with 4 points and I drew limited entry deer with 6 points. That's like, okay, don't plan on getting that lucky. I don't know how I did, but I did. Most of the draw odds, you're going to be way up here in the double digits is where the double digit points, where the majority of the tags end up getting allocated. So most people are applying in Utah for elk. That's the most popular non-resident species. That's what everybody thinks. All right, this is where, Utah, huge bulls. And yes, the reputation that Utah has for its huge elk is well-deserved. Even if it's not quite what it was 10 years ago, still extremely good hunts available to you. But if you're new to the game or you're at the low point level, I want you to think about these numbers I'm going to give you, because this might change whether or not you want to sink your costs in here or you want to go look elsewhere. 2021, for limited entry elk in just the non-resident category, there were 279 tags issued, limited entry elk tags. 19,856 non-residents applied for those 279 tags. That's 1 tag for every 71 applicants. So even if we all had, say there wasn't even bonus points, or the way they do their hybrid draw, that means if you say, all right, 1 tag for 71 applicants, that means your odds are about 1.4% if it was just a no point system. Now you take that where people up here with 20 plus points have 10 to 20 times greater probability than you. Now your odds just went down to probably 0.1%. So I just want you to think about that. And here's the other stat that a lot of people ignore. But this is one of the first things I look at in Utah and Colorado and Wyoming, any state that has a preference point portion to their draw. They're in the elk pile, in the elk column, there were 17,509 people who just bought a point. They aren't even showing up in the draw odds you're looking at. So for every 6 people who apply, there's 5 people who are just buying points. So you got another 63 years worth of people over here buying points that we don't even know about. So if you're just getting into the Utah game and considering how many of these people have double digits or even 15 or 20 or more points, you're really buying into something that is the equivalent of, you know, these super tag raffles and other stuff in other states. So I say all that so that you have realistic expectations if you're just getting into it. Now, if you're like me and say you already got a lot of points accumulated for some species, or you say, hey, I go back and I hunt with a friend on the general Utah deer hunt every 4 years, which is, you can do that as a non-resident. And you say, I'm already buying the license for that purpose. Heck, these are just like buying raffle tickets. Then, you know, that's a different picture. But for me, I've got all these pronghorn points. So until I burn them, I'm going to be buying that Utah license. So for me to buy these $15 raffle tickets for all these other species, it's easy for me to justify the investment. And that's why I say value is dependent upon your situation, your budget, your interests, and all the other things. So I can't tell you if it's a good value for you. And what's going to happen when I burn all these pronghorn points? I'm going to have to make an assessment about, all right, is this really worth it now? So all of that is Utah. I would suggest if you want more details, go out to Go Hunt, sign up for Insider, use promo code Randy and get $50 in their gear shop. But most of all, don't miss the deadline. If you're going to do Utah, you have March 3rd, 2022, 11 p.m. Mountain Time. Anyhow, thanks for watching. I hope that this is your year that you draw your Utah tag. Good luck.